Educated, Black female perspective. My name is Dr. Marshall. I am your host, and I am super excited to be back before you for another segment. I have an amazing, phenomenal powerhouse soror and sister tonight who will serve as my guest, Miss Sade Wise. Welcome, Sade.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I can't complain.
Uh,
Rested.
well, good. I'm definitely going to get plenty of that next week. So thank you so much. Glad you're rested. And so again, to those who are tuning in and to those who will be tuning in later, this is the Educated Black female perspective. And tonight's episode is titled The Dark Reality of the Presidential Election. Now, for those of you that don't know a little bit about why this platform was created, I do want to give you a synopsis. I am a recent PhD grad. And so, one of the things that my amazing chair mentioned to me when I completed my PhD is to seek out opportunities to talk about issues that I addressed in my dissertation. So, I realized not only could I seek out opportunities, I could create those opportunities too. So, this is why this platform exists. My goal as I move forward in the future is to create a platform that will allow people who look like me, people from my community, my culture, who have experienced, lived tragic circumstances such as racism, disproportionality, racial disparities, you name it. Any of those issues that have really, really impacted people that they have lived and they just simply want to tell their truth. And this platform that I created is a platform where people can tell their unapologetic truth. So I definitely wanted to share why this platform exists. So now we are going to get down to business. So tonight, again, is episode 2, and it is titled The Dark Reality of the Presidential Election. So, Ms. Wise, our opening question. I want to ask you, the day of the presidential election, as you were watching, or if you were like me, kind of turned the TV off or turned it back on, once you finally realized the reality of the outcome, what were your initial thoughts? How did you feel?
I actually went to bed. And and I say that is important because that's very different from me, right? Like, so I am very political. I share political thoughts and opinions and information on social media all the time. I would even say that there are people who follow, some of the things I say just to keep abreast because a lot of people don't know. But I actually made a post that said, you can turn the TV off and that's okay. And that's exactly what I did. I got in the bed because I felt I didn't feel right. So I said, you know what? We'll see about it tomorrow. And I went to bed.
And I do recall seeing your post, and I felt the same way. It was like in my mind, I was thinking, okay, God, I see the results. Maybe if I turn the TV off and wake back up, the numbers will change. The numbers will be in our favor. And when I woke up and saw it, just like you, and I was just in awe. I couldn't even believe it. So even though I am an early bird, I have always stayed up every night, especially as I've gotten older, just to see the outcome of the election.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was one of the reasons, and I do want to share with our audience because I do follow my soror, and as I would see her comment, when I thought about there was no way that I could not talk about this because I would post like you similarly, but I realized I can't just let my post speak for itself. I need to talk about it. I need to speak on it. And I remember seeing your post talking about, the next day, what it may look like at work. And all I could think about was, God, how do I, as a Black woman, bounce back? And I had to do my own post because I was like, all right, Shawania, you're going to have to regroup. So I was taking your advice, even when you didn't know. I was like, I have to regroup. I have to talk to myself. And I literally was like, I am enough. We are enough. Even though society may not see us that way sometimes, we are enough. So thank you wholeheartedly for sharing your thoughts with me. So now this episode, what I shared with Mrs. Wise, we are going to break this down into 3 segments. The first set of questions, they're going to be all about what went wrong. The second set of questions will focus on, basically as a culture, what are we doing? And then thirdly, we'll wrap up with the closing that focuses on how do we move forward. So starting with the first question, what went wrong? So we're going to talk about some stats, and I want to really hear your thoughts, Sade, and we're going to basically just have an open discourse, and we're going to speak the unapologetic truth. So my first question, during the presidential election, once all the tallies came in, the data showed that 91% of African American females, they came out, they voted, they made their voices heard. So there was that 9% that did not vote and support Vice President Harris. So what are your sentiments about the women that fell in that 91% that came out strong supporting Vice President Harris, but also that 9% that voted in favor of the other candidate?
I mean, I'm in the 91, so it feels good to be, amongst a sisterhood of like-minded people. I think that when you look at her resume, when you look at her, how she presents herself, her track record, I couldn't imagine being in the nine. However, it also reminded me that Black people are not a monolith, right? And so my lived experiences, my current lived experiences, past, and current, I could not speak for them because I don't know anyone in the nine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know these people. I mean, I'm assuming it's a Candace Owens or I don't know these people. And I kind of feel sad for them because I don't think they understand the level of self-hatred. I mean, I think I've scrolled on TikTok and seen a few who make these comments, and it's kind of like, do you hear yourself? Like, is this for streams? Is this for likes? Or is this who you identify yourself as, right? Because I would be remiss to say that people don't usually go with their liked group, right? Their intersectionality, because they do. We see that in schools. We see that in colleges. You walk into school, there's even books about it, like, why do all the Black kids sit together at lunch, right? So to be of the nine, I feel sad for them because I wonder, like, what happened in your life that took you there? Because it's not all about finances. It can't be. It's something more.
I'm glad you said that and you mentioned intersectionality. And I would also like to add to what you said. I'm okay if you don't necessarily have to vote for the person I voted for. But when I look at the two candidates, like you said, and I'll weigh the qualifications, I can't even fathom who fell in that 9% too as well. And you mentioned intersectionality. That was the actual focus, the method that I used in my dissertation, because as a Black female, we face discrimination just for being Black, but also a female. And so I'm glad you pointed that out. So we're going to get a little bit more to, you talked about social media and how people post. And I will say, I do believe sometimes people who are not really, and you don't have to really be into politics, but do your research. I do believe sometimes people go randomly crazy just posting things for likes without even thinking about, what does this say about me as a person?
Or even the reach that they have.
Yes, and we're going to definitely talk a little bit about that even more, because we're going to share about one particular post. Well, actually, two examples from a male and a female a little later. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So just to add to this particular set of questions. So we talked about the African American females. So now let's look at Caucasian women. So about 51% of Caucasian women, they actually voted for Trump. So that means the other 49% did support Vice President Harris. Now, when you think about this, we had this whole shift across the country, united we stand. And in my opinion, I was thinking, okay, we're going to see more Caucasian women support her, especially based upon some of the things that the other candidate has done. And it's explicitly out there for people to see that really degrades women. And for me, just hearing those numbers from that particular gender and race, what does that say to you, or how do you feel about when you hear that number, 49% supporting VP Harris, but 51 supporting Trump? Like, what's your perception? How do you feel about that?
I think it's awesome to be within the 49 because it does identify that there's a shift of awareness for marginalized communities, right? So whether that be college educated, and I'm almost curious to know what that breakdown is, right?
I'm
Of the
actually,
49.
I'm going to, I'm glad you said that. Let me go ahead and give you the number.
Please.
That was the follow-up question. So I'm going to add this. So hopefully this, that way you could add a little bit more to what you're about to say. So I was listening to, CNN, and I'm listening to like the data. And so what was shared by political analysts is that particular 51% of those women that actually voted for Trump, they are actually what we would consider not educated or lack college education. So there is a lack of educated demographic.
Which goes with that self-awareness, right? Because a lot of people leave small towns and go to larger universities, and they are in community with people who they would have never crossed paths with, right? So they begin to align more with marginalized communities because of access and exposure, right? So that's what I think about when I think about the 49% is access and exposure. When I think of the 51, it is a bit concerning because it kind of highlights this challenge of oneness, or what's happening in your home. Like, how do you vote against your own likeness, like your own ability to grow and to even have like some autonomy, right? Not to say that they were forced to, but sometimes I also find that people just vote based on what they know. And I remember there was a girl, not this go around, but the last go around, I went to high school with her, and I know that she was in special education, and not where we see it now, where somebody may push in there on like she was on the non-general education track. And she got food stamps her entire life. I'm from a rural area, got food stamps her entire life, free lunch, was visibly, poor, and was screaming, Trump to me. And it's like, honey, do you do you understand what it means to get social security, and not because you work but because of a disability? Like, it's almost, but it's not her, because she really doesn't even have the cognitive functioning to actually read. Like, I'm almost questioning like her reading level, right? Like, that's what I mean by non-general education. I don't even believe that you are able to read on a third grade level, but someone is feeding you this information and you know nothing else.
That's powerful. And when I thought about that, just the 51%, and I hate to say it, but this platform is about speaking the truth. You don't even have to have, in my opinion, a high school diploma or a college degree to be able to read and research.
Mm-hmm.
So when I even think about the possibility of people in that 51% that may not have, completed, high school or college degree, there is there is a way to talk to someone to better understand the differences between the two candidates. But even with that being said, just going back to the lack of education, in my opinion, and what I've seen just being in the field of education, you can be easily persuaded. It is
Mm-hmm.
so easily to persuade people when they lack that sense of intelligence. And so but I have to say that even if you don't understand or you don't comprehend, when you vote, that's your voice. And you at that point have to make a decision on, okay, what am I going to do to make sure that I better understand, one candidate compared to the other one. So
Mm-hmm.
that for me is just, it was baffling. But when I heard that number, I was in my head, I was thinking I can see it now.
Oh,
And
of
I do want
course.
to pause there because I do want the audience to know a little bit about you, because you shared this with me. So Sade, if you would, first of all, Sade is a licensed master social worker. And I was so excited about this whole segment. You all, I'm going to apologize. I did not officially introduce my host. So we're going to pause since this is my platform, and then we're going to come back. I want you to know who Sade is. So I know her as my soror and my, fellow Troy alum, but she is also a compassionate and skilled clinician dedicated to guiding her clients through their healing journey. With the foundation in a client-centered care system, Sade's therapeutic approach is rooted in meeting individuals precisely where they are, fostering a space where self-awareness, resilience, and personal growth can thrive. And I see that in you. So, drawing upon her expertise in child and family services, she has extensive experience supporting those facing depression, anxiety, trauma, and relational challenges. And her therapeutic style is more of a solution focus. And I hear that in already in some of your responses. We're going to get to the root of the problem. She also focuses on empowering her clients to recognize and harness their inner strengths. Through a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness based interventions, Ms. Wise equips clients with tools to develop self awareness, health, and set healthy boundaries and navigate life's complexities with increased confidence. And that's what we're doing right now. So I do want to, I had to pause right there because I definitely want to make sure that you all out there know who my guest is and what she brings to the table and why I say that I know she's an amazing person and an amazing guest to have on this segment. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the next particular set of stats. So throughout, my research, I was able to see that Black men came out during the election. 70% of Black men voted for Vice President Harris. So that means we had 30% of our Black men that supported Trump. So, tell me your thoughts about that. I see you got to pick up the coffee. Okay. So tell me, your thoughts on that.
Shout out to the 70%, right? Because I feel like they did a really, really, really good job of making people believe that the 70% weren't even going to show. I mean,
Yes.
I almost feel like they broke the budget trying to down the level of support of Black men for VP Harris. And they did a good job, right? Like putting out a lot of misinformation, but I guess that kind of goes to like other misinformation about Black men. So not surprised about that. For the 30%, I'm almost thinking of were they wanting to go against the traditional structures based on misinformation, right? They think that Trump is this guy. I so I told y'all I was from a rural area. So my other half side of my family is also from a rural area, and I've been blocked from one of my, like a guy that I've known literally my entire life from that area, who's a felon, who is lower income family, and would argue with me about Trump, about a stimulus check. And it's like, how did you get this warped understanding of what even took place, right? And would never necessarily engage in conversation because I know you don't know, right? Because shout out to Georgia, right? Because we were able to get the stimulus, with the special election, right? But they didn't even recognize that. So sometimes I feel like some Black men do things to try to fit a mold into a different box. Like they'll do anything to kind of squeeze themselves or to get themselves aligned with a different or a specific group in order to kind of hone in on their likeness, right? To increase their likeness, almost to like assimilate per se, right? So that when I think of that 30%, I think of them. Yeah.
And that's interesting that you said that, because when I saw the data, it really touched me, because one thing about me, I am going to always support my Black men, especially if you're doing something that's proactive And especially when it comes down to running for an election, if I feel like you are the better qualified candidate. And it just reminded me when former President Obama ran. Like, we came out and we supported,
Mm-hmm.
and he won. Not just one term, but 2 terms. And then, so in my head, I'm thinking, surely with VP Harris running and her track record, her credentials, we're going to come out of numbers to support her. And so I will say I was proud of that 70, because there was a lot of conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about, you know what, let's just go ahead and talk about it now. So with that 70%, in that 30%, there was an NFL player by the name of Le'Veon Bell, who was actually, he played with the Pittsburgh Steelers years ago.
Levon Bell?
Le'Veon Bell.
Is Le'Veon?
He played during the time that it was him and AB playing at the same time. I can't remember.
I think I saw him. He stormed the Capitol or something.
Well, he didn't storm the Capitol, but he was actually at one of Trump's rallies. And so after the rally, he came back on one of his social media platforms just ranting, if VP Harris wins, I'm leaving the country. And I'm like, okay, exactly. That's what a lot of people are like, okay, bye. Make sure you hold them to your word. But when I heard that comment, I'm thinking, this is so ignorant. And I love all people, but I have a special place for my community and my culture, especially given what we have had to endure over the years. So when I see someone like that, a Black man that really has, made a name for himself in the league, but now you're no longer in the league. So what are you doing? Are you trying to make a name for yourself out there? Like you talked about jumping on the Trump bandwagon. So when I saw that, my question to you was, what does that say about people, especially like that, when you have that celebrity status, when you see ignorance like that?
I think that just goes back to the Trump wanting to align himself with a certain demographic of people for whatever reason, right? Because when I think of NFL players, I mean, we can, not even NFL, we can just look at athletes in general, how they identify or choose who they procreate with or who they wife. So I don't even give him a lot of merit just because I feel like he's just wanting to align with a certain demographic.
Right. I was thinking the same thing. You just want attention. All right. So I have one more set of stats in this series of questions. So let's talk about the Latino votes. So overall, there are about 70% of Latino voters that did support VP Harris, but in that 30%, the majority that did not support Harris were men. And so what do you think about that, especially given the fact that we know how Trump really feels about deportation? So what are your thoughts on that?
That to me is the most baffling. I really don't understand it. I don't even have like I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. Only thing I can maybe think of is like maybe Venezuelan men or like Cubans, and they try to assimilate a lot. There's a lot of like I don't know if I want to call it colorism in those countries and those communities. And that was the one, I don't know. That one baffled me. I'm
glad you said that, colorism. Because that's where my mind was going. Like, sometimes I think people, you forget, and don't get me wrong, like, it's not all about race, but when it comes down to situations like that, just to fit in, when you think about who do I more align with, I think sometimes people get that misconstrued. No, it's all about, when it comes down to voting, it shouldn't even be about, it's just about race. It should be about the most qualified candidate. So the way you felt, your sentiments, I was really baffled, because Trump is literally already, this is set in motion about the whole conversation. And I did want to share this. Somebody shared with me actually today, fellow educator. They were talking about, how we have family engagement events at schools. And they said the most recent event, this was the first time ever in years that no one showed up. And their population is heavily Latino, Hispanic. And to me was it was communicated to them that the reason that they do not feel comfortable coming out right now, because of now Trump actually won the election. So I'm thinking, well, that's an interesting point, considering the fact that a lot of them voted for him. So it's definitely going to be how things unfold, because after election, I don't know if you've noticed, people are saying almost like they're second guessing themselves. Well, the election's over.
Oh man, I saw that. It was a creator was talking about being in the school line and a parent talking, saying like how now they're nervous about their insurance and they hope that he gets rid of Obamacare, but not the Affordable Care Act. And it's like, excuse me.
Right.
I just keep thinking of that meme. You have 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Because what? It doesn't make sense. You
Right.
have
I
to
was
laugh really, because it's like, come again. Come
Yeah.
again.
It's really sad because, even though I'm like, okay, I don't live my life in fear, it's just in my head I'm thinking, what will this next year look like?
Yeah.
So I guess we will see though. All right.
Listen, I saw this video yesterday where they named can't even think of her name, but the WWE ex-wife as the Secretary of Education, and I saw this teacher saying,
No. Oh my gosh, you're talking about McMahon.
yes.
Oh my Lord. I saw that and it didn't dump. I was like, that name sounds familiar, but I didn't know it was Vince Mc. Oh Lord, have mercy, Jesus. Vince
The
McMahon.
guy was like saying, like, now that she's going to be the Secretary of Education, this is how he would do classroom management. And he was doing like a bunch of wrestling moves. And though it was so funny, it was really like, is this real life? And it is.
I'm glad you said that because I literally saw it because I remember the former one, Betsy DeVos.
Oh,
It was like
goodness, yes.
no education experience. Lord have mercy. That's all I can say. All right. So I do want to ask a question pertaining to this particular celebrity. So I shared Le'Veon Bell as my male example, but I don't know if you're familiar with her name is Amanda Seals. So she's a comedian. And so she took to her social media platform, just going on this rant about VP Harris, just like, it basically, in essence, just trying to bring her down. Like she's not qualified. What has she done for Black people? And I'm just like, this is embarrassing.
Amanda Seals.
Amanda Seals. Mm-hmm.
I actually unfollowed her.
Look, when I
followed her for years, but I didn't understand it because following her for so long, I feel like she doesn't put on a persona on her social media. It's not who you see like on interviews, or she's unpolished. She's herself, right? In her natural, on her couch or in her backyard, like she's who I would assume would be at like a barbecue, right? And following her for years and hearing her take, so then starting to hear this take, I didn't really understand it. I was really confused, and so I just unfollowed her altogether.
That's interesting. Honestly, I didn't even know who she was. I didn't even know she existed until I first saw her on. So Shannon Sharp, he has his own podcast.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first time I saw a clip of her. And then fast forward, when I saw her going on this rant, I was like, who is this woman? So I connected it. But what I liked about after the fact, Bakari Sellers, who was an amazing political analyst, he was on the Ricky Smiley show, and they were asking him about, how he felt about it. And he basically said, well, you know what, first, I'm not going to talk negative against a Black woman, but I have to speak the truth. And so what he talked about was, let me give you the list of things that Vice President Harris has done, how she co-authored the George Floyd Policing Act to try to prevent anything like that ever happen again, to especially just people in general, but especially like Black males, because what happened to George Floyd was ridiculous. And many people don't know that she was part of that. And then also he talks about how in California, people want to talk about she was the one that was putting away a lot of people, and they don't understand she was not that type person. She was the one that really pushed for recidivism. So
I saw a clip that says it was like telling her that she needs to be an attorney and not a social worker. Like I think it was like in the newspaper or something.
But those things that he shared, like you mentioned, my thing is what Bakari was essentially saying is you can Google this. So it's like you're out there speaking this nonsense, and I'm like, clearly it has to be for likes or attention, because it's foolery. So I was just curious about that. And here we go again with someone that like I said, I never even knew who she was. So I was like, well, maybe she's just trying to get back in the spotlight because it was clearly ignorant.
She's been going on rants now for a while, but never to the, for me to the point where it was just like,
Right.
I didn't get it. I didn't get it.
Gotcha.
But she
Okay.
got gone. I know that. I was like, I can't.
Yeah, I never saw her anymore. And I said, well, maybe somebody set her down.
Mm-mm.
And well, maybe she went back to look at herself because
Yeah.
sometimes maybe reflecting because I was really embarrassed for her. I was embarrassed, number one, that she was talking about VPS like that and it wasn't true. And I'm thinking, you're embarrassing yourself because you're not even speaking the truth.
Right.
So, all right. So, our next question. So, I wanted to talk about in this part, basically like what are we doing? And so we kind of talked a little bit about already, but I want to go back to Black men because to me this is important. Throughout this whole election, we heard a lot about our Black men, our Black brothers, just being reluctant to vote and just really to me the whole reluctant part. So I think about when we see the resume of VP Harris and the resume of Trump and just being from our community, our culture, and I think about what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? So your thoughts on that, especially looking at her track record compared to his.
I honestly think that Black men need to talk to Black men, right? Because I don't want to say they're lost because I feel like people are able to make their own decisions based on their lived experiences, I like to always say people can only understand what they can understand. And I feel like no one can particularly reach a Black man like another Black man, like within their circle, within their reach, not even on like a national level. This is like more grassroots, right? Very family, friends, the block, homeboys, like that's who has to be having these conversations, right? Because that's who they trust. And not in a way to sway them in any way, but really to just have an open dialogue to identify like what do you need and like to be successful in this life. What do you not understand about the economy or politics or tariffs, who's paying them?
Right.
And I really think it has to be like one of those situations, like a real grassroots initiative.
That's powerful that you said that. And I will admit, I remember I was, of course, we have people that we're connected with on our social media platform. And I saw this post and it was someone that, we're not friends, but we know each other. And when I saw the post coming from a Black man speaking just pure ignorance, I'm just going to put it that way, like, I don't know if I can vote for her, but I'm going to vote for him. And I'm leaning towards voting for him because I already know what he's done. So that's my reason for possibly voting for him because I already know what he's done. I don't know anything about her. And then I was like, please have something else coming behind that. And the more I read, I was so astounded. I was just so shaken. And this goes back to, what I said before. If you can talk like that and not even take the time, and you're educated now, not even take the time out to research, Google about her, see what she's done, but say, I already know what he's done. The same person that was saying there are good people on both sides of the aisles, and he was referencing the KKK, the same person that was willing to send a mob out into a crowd when the Black Lives Matter, or they were protesting. But you're saying, I know what he's already done, what he's done to us, our culture, but you would rather lean towards him. At that point, I have to be honest, I unfriended that person because I was like, number one, I love all people, but when I see things like that, and we're not related, we're not that close, and I will add people that I may know, but when I see things like that, I'm a firm believer in, number one, light and dark don't mix. So when you talk like that and you speak ignorance, we can't mix. We are not the same. And D.L. Hughley, I don't know if you saw what his post as a Black man, and I have to add this, when he was the one that talked bad about VP Harris when she was running before, he had enough integrity. He had enough respect. And to me, morale to come back out and apologize for what he had done and said, I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I was wrong.
Ideal Hughley.
Yes, and I applauded that. So I say that to our community, our culture, when we talk ignorance and we're speaking things that are not logical, they don't make sense, and you can't back it up with facts. Like, what does that say about you as a person? So I did want to share that because I think sometimes we're taking social media sometimes to a place where it's like attention. I, I,
Mm-hmm.
I want to just try to get likes. But you forget this stuff follows you. Like that's a reflection of
Of
you.
you.
So I did want to share that. But I want to kind of ask your perception on we think about what are we doing as a culture? What are we doing as a community? Because I'm looking at where we are in 2024. And I think about how far we've come, but I never thought I would feel as though in 2024 we still have so much work to do within our own community, within our own culture. And you talked a little bit about grassroots, but I just kind of want to ask this: when you tell me, what do you think as far as like what are we doing? What can we do as a culture to help each other so we can place ourselves in a better place for the next election? Because this is another number I wanted to share: 8 million people, 8 million people that voted in 2020
Didn't.
vote in this recent election. And when I heard that number, I was like, are you kidding me? So when President Biden won, in comparison to this recent election, 8 million people didn't vote. And I firmly believe a lot of that percentage, that number was our makeup. It's the makeup of everybody, but just hearing that, as you tell me your thoughts, like what do we do as a nation, as a community? How do we deal with that? What do we do about that 8 million people that did not vote?
I mean, I personally think that in some places, like voting is not widely accessible, um, because I haven't voted in Alabama in a really, really long time, and it didn't dawn on me that they don't have early voting, right? Like I voted like weeks before on a random Saturday morning, and to see my friend post about standing in a line, and it was a long line and like also a very rural area, and I'm thinking to myself, so if you don't have leave, if you have to work and you don't have like a job where you can just kind of call out or get that extra time to go vote, like you don't get to vote. But because during the last election, people had lost their jobs, people, or, lost a lot of hours, people had a lot of downtime, that it was more accessible during that time. And people were pissed, right? Like they were mad about all the things. So they made it their point, whether it was easily accessible or not, to get there. But I think that early voting, um, mail-in voting, like those things have to be available for our seniors, for people who are, who may, like, we can call out, right? And nothing, we're fine. But that's not everybody's reality, right? Like I have parents in my, just with my clients, who they can't even leave work for 2 hours without the fear of being fired. Can you imagine having to stand in a line for an amount of time that you don't know to vote? I'm not going to vote. I'm
Right.
poor anyway. Why would I, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to work. I got to feed my kid. So just having more options, and obviously, like, people are going to say, like, anybody can do a mail-in ballot, but there are things that you have to do to prove who you are with those. It's not just requesting, but that's misinformation. Misinformation flies so fast, speed of
Mhm.
lightning,
Mhm.
than actual correct information. So I think accessibility is one major thing.
Okay.
Also, I think that not sometimes I feel like people don't vote because they don't, like, they're over it, right? Like they
Mm.
feel like their vote is not important. They feel, conspiracy theories. They know who they're going to pick anyway. That whole, like, run of the mill, and it's sometimes easier just to believe those than it is to challenge that thought pattern.
It's interesting you said that about Alabama because I remember asking my mom, I said, "Are you going to vote early?" Because they live in Alabama. She was like, "We don't have early vote."
I
So
had no
like you,
idea.
I haven't voted. I haven't been back since 2013 to even vote because I've been out of Alabama since then. And I'm like, with you bringing that up. And I literally remember saying to her, I need to check on that for you because surely they have early voting and they don't. Wow.
Mhm. And then I
Okay.
think there are some voting places, or Alabama, like the ID in Alabama was not. I don't know if it's the real ID.
Mm.
So apparently you have to have a real ID, which is like kind of like the ones that we probably would have,
Mhm.
and the one in the ID in Alabama. And I don't know about other states, but they didn't have that. So then they were having to like change it over, but they were like places, I think, like, was it Lowndes County? Some of those like rural counties, like the place where they can go and get the ID, that DMV was closed and it was like super far away. So
Mhm.
there are obstacles in place where, I probably can think of 5 DMVs just around where I am right now that I can go to like tomorrow. I mean,
Right.
I don't even have to go to the DMV to update my tag, but that's what we have here because it's accessible. And obviously, I'm pretty sure like population plays a role,
Mhm.
but I can literally walk in a Kroger and update my tag. They can't do that in Alabama. They're gonna stand in that line at that courthouse within that county, and sometimes that courthouse, or we're using courthouse right now, but that polling place or that DMV to get the new ID is
Mhm.
not accessible to someone who may not have access to transportation.
That's interesting that you said that because the reality is, especially, because I know where I'm from originally, like my hometown, like we live out in the country and literally we have one stoplight. And I remember where we used to go vote. And so for someone that has worked all day and they're tired and that is the only day, like there has to be other avenues and opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully, my hope is maybe moving forward. I know like Stacey Abrams has.
Mima is not having it.
Yeah, like for us, Stacey Abrams, like we're not having it in Georgia, but I feel as though some of that energy, like somebody is going to have to take that on in their state, or we're going to have to see a shift across the nation where
Mm-hmm.
somebody is leading that charge. Because you're right, you know, when you're in a situation like that, like you're tired when work is over, and if you can take off, it's like, will I make it there on time? So thank you for sharing that. That's important. Well, the last set of questions we're going to move into is like basically like as a nation, as a community, as a culture, like where do we go from here? I saw this quote on LinkedIn and it was powerful. So I'm going to share this with you. So it was posted by a Caucasian woman and it caught my eye when I saw it. But then I looked at who posted and I was like, wow, somebody gets it. Somebody gets it from the majority. So what she said was, white women vote against their own best interest as long as we hurt black women. Let me say that again.
Mm.
She said white women vote against their own best interest as long as we hurt black women. Tell me, tell me your thoughts on that profound statement.
I mean, I feel like the root of that would be a fear,
Mm,
right? Because how are you in a better position than me? And whether that's consciously or unconsciously, how can you be in a better place than me?
when I saw it and I read it, it spoke volumes. Like there was nothing else that needed to be said. But when I read it, I wish that it could be something that could be just shared, just because I actually took it. I was waiting for tonight before I shared it, but I wanted to make sure we talked about it because to me, I look at it as if human beings, how can you sit back and vote against someone that you know should be the leader of the nation, who is qualified, knowing that this person supports your best interest, has your best interest at heart, but you won't because you would rather hurt someone from the minority, someone
Yeah.
from the community that has always had to endure the struggle. And it's someone from the community, when you think about Black females, Black women, it's like, and this goes into a whole nother conversation. You can be qualified, you can be more than qualified, and people will still question your qualifications. And I look at Vice President Harris and I saw that comment. I'm thinking, you would rather take someone that is going to be against humanity, your best interest, and you have this woman, and never, and I need to make it clear, I'm not saying Vice President was Harris, but when I look at the bigger scheme of things and what she stands for morale, character, there is no way that I would not choose her. How can people from a certain demographic not vote for someone who's qualified simply because you want to see somebody else hurting? You rather see someone else, basically suffering. Like, how do you have a conscience? And I think about,
You don't need a conscience when you have cognitive distortions, right? So
talk
you
about that.
that can be your the deeper piece can be wanting to question that person because of who they are. But what you do is you almost like convince yourself that the reason is abortion, or the reason is taxes, or there's so many other reasons that I can label, even though down within it's fear, or not wanting you to be seen as something more than what I perceive you to be. I
And
can
then
trick myself into believing anything.
that's so
Anybody can,
hard. But
right?
that is so hard because you think about for years who typically, when you think about careers like elevation, who has always basically been able to plummet without even having the qualifications. So when you're now, we are all in, we're decades way past, when Dr. King was living, and I think about back then what he talked about, just being judged by your character and not by the color of your skin. I'm thinking we're still here. We're still dealing with this now in 2024. And that's what makes me even more upset. So I have to say, when I talk about things like this, I trust God, and God knows I love all people, but I have to speak out. Like, I can't be silent. And that's one of the things that Dr. King pushed, was not being silent about things that matter. We can't be in 2024. And you talked about fear, but so talk to me about that. Why do you feel like there's a sense of fear?
I mean, I just feel like if for you to go against yourself because of a certain demographic, it has to be fear. And
Mm-hmm.
and I don't mean like always like jealousy, fear. Not, I'm sorry. Yeah, like a jealousy or like I'm scared fear. It's more like you cannot be more than me, right? How can I allow you to be more than me? Because I'm sure if we broke down, I think it was the 51 or 50, how many of those are in rural communities? How many of those women are married and have been married maybe since they were 18 or 19? How many of them have ever left their hometown? How many of them actually went to college? How many of them have access to other communities?
Mm-hmm. That's
And
true.
I'm pretty sure that there are some familiar, some of those are aligned. Those numbers are probably going to be within the same percentage if we really broke it down, right? Because you can't, goes back to my favorite, you can only understand what you can understand,
Mm-hmm.
right? And without that opportunity or access to experience someone else's experience,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to have it. I'm going to see you, one dimensional or two dimensional. I'm not going to see all of you,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, some people can't read politics and understand what it is, right? That
Mm-hmm.
goes back to I hope they get rid of Obamacare, but not the Affordable Care Act.
Mm.
What?
Right.
You
That
know?
right. That doesn't even make sense.
Or them believing that people are out here having abortions at 9 months. Be for real.
Yeah.
Who's doing that?
Right. You know, when I think about, to a lot of, as we kind of, kind of wrap up and close, I would like for you to, I'm actually this first question because I hear the passion in your voice. I hear how, like, you are, I already knew that you were my educated Black sister, but I hear how, like, you are just amazing. So tell me, do you see yourself maybe in the future, maybe one day running for a political?
Absolutely not.
Why
Mm, because I read the comments. Okay.
Who was that? No, that was B. Pierre said she doesn't read the comments.
And I
Okay.
read the comments, right? And I cannot be running for office and
Right,
somebody pulls up the comments.
right,
It's
right.
not, I mean, you know what? I take that back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because Donald Trump is the president for a second time.
Mm-hmm.
And I really could be saying anything and still be voted, but no. I think the public scrutiny, the amount of misinformation, somebody can take one thing about you and now people believe it's true. It becomes law. I think that I can't even think about it right now because I am of the 92 in that's getting rest, right? The
Mm-hmm.
91 point whatever we're gonna run to 92. I'm resting. I can't even think about educating people on what's happening in the world, right? I think I shared one about I hope those eggs go down. When Walmart talked about in an article at Forbes about how prices are going to go up with tariffs, and it's like, how do you not know what a tariff is, and why would you ever think that the producer is going to pay a tariff? Why would I do that? I would just go somewhere else. Um, and so I can't.
I can understand. I said I'm definitely going to have to continue praying on that one because it's definitely something that I I'll say up until I started teaching and as I started transition out of the classroom, I would think about it. And that's the only reason, like, I finished my PhD in public policy administration. I said, okay, I can make myself more of a powerhouse. But it's like, just basically some of the things that you said and just thinking about the world we live in. It's almost like that moment for a Black woman. It's like,
Your kids don't even have a life outside of you. Like, I
yeah.
think about the Obama girls. They can't even like just be. You know, they can't do anything.
Hmm.
One I can't. I think it's Sasha.
Hmm. The
Maybe
one.
it was no, it's Malia. She dropped her last name so she could do film, right? And people are like,
Oh,
you look at the comments, and I have a real big problem with looking at the comments, and they're like, I would have dropped that last name too. No, she dropped that last name because she didn't want to be identified. She wanted to just be able to be right, to create her films, and not for people to take or give to her based on who she is.
right.
Like, we don't see President Clinton's children or Bush's children. Like, where are they? And
Yeah.
I can assume that they're out living a life trying to keep a low profile because of politics and
Mm.
because of how people are. And people just have like a evilness about themselves
Mhm.
just because they don't agree with you.
Right. I guess for me, well, not I guess. The only reason that I would actually decide to do it later, definitely not now, is because that old saying, being sick and tired of being sick and tired. I am
Mm-hmm.
definitely sick and tired of being sick and tired. So on that note, we're going to go ahead and get ready to close out. But before I close out, I do want to say thank you, Sade, wholeheartedly for tag teaming with me on this collaboration. Like, you just don't know, like, how honored I am that you said yes, because you didn't hesitate. You said yes, and I literally knew that you were the person that I wanted to collaborate with. So I truly am honored, and I
Thank
truly am
you.
so happy that you said yes. So you are so welcome. So as we close, I do want to share this in closing, because when I think about where we are as a community, as a nation, um, this was something that I wanted to share with everyone. This was a quote that someone shared, and I thought it was powerful. It states, "Slavery is white history, and how we survived is Black history."
Mm-hmm.
When I read that, all I could think of in my head was, we're still trying to survive. So we don't even want to. We want to eliminate, the history that truly exists. The reality is our country is rooted in racism, and we want to taint that. We want to water it down. And I read that quote, and I'm like, we are still trying to survive. And it just brought me back to, what I was sharing earlier about Dr. King. But even in his "I Have a Dream" speech, he talked about 100 years later, the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. I'm like, that speech was so long ago, but when that election happened, like before and after, I'm like, Lord, those words still ring true in it still ring. It may not be as bad, but I still feel like as a nation, we still want to cripple people because they don't look like us, because we have our own way of how we think, our way of confidence and how we look. No, we can't still be doing that. And so for me, this is why this segment was so powerful, because I felt as though, as two Black women that really that take pride in who they are. And I get that from you. And I know for me, it's not about pride. It's not about being conceited. It's about being appreciative and grateful and thankful that, you are a proud Black woman. And I'm not going to let anybody break me,
Mm-hmm.
feel less than, because I don't look like you. You know what I'm saying? So this is why I am so excited about this segment. And I want to say thank you again. I greatly appreciate it. And thank you to those that may have tuned in. And thank you to those who will tune in later. This is the Educated Black Female Perspective. I'm Dr. Marshall, and my phenomenal guest, Sade Wise.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much. You all have a blessed night and a phenomenal week. Good night.